I know that many of you are really starting to scramble. There's a lot going on and you're doing a lot of work. And I thought today what I would do would be to identify some very practical things that you should be doing as you begin to tighten up the final stages of your study. I decided to title this talk Consistency and Habit because what I'd like to see is that you create consistency in the work that you're doing so that it becomes a habit on exam day. It's been my experience that when people get to the exam and they have the anxiety and the stress that comes with the test, that if things are not baked in as habits, it's very easy to slip out of them and to do things incorrectly. And so students who might have been working properly and practicing properly suddenly forget how to do things. And that's not what we want. How do you avoid that? You make it a habit. You do work consistently now so that what you're doing is habitual on test day. And I thought I'd talk about it in 4 areas. First of all, the multi-state, how you can be consistent there. Secondly, in writing essays. Third, in how you would prepare performance tests. And finally, how you can handle sleep and exercise, the things that are not bar exam related directly. So let's jump in and take a look at each of those 4 items. I want to start with multi-state because it's been my experience that bar takers can perform and practice one way, but when they get to the test, sometimes they just lose it and they forget to do what we've been talking about. In our course, we've been talking about the intuitive approach to answering bar questions. I know that some of you are saying, oh, I can't do that. That would be guessing. Yes, it would. You'd be using your genius brain, the part of your mind behind here, the back of your head. That genius brain, the non-conscious brain, is what we want to be using, not the conscious brain. Conscious brain is simply not going to be able to give you enough information fast enough on the bar exam. So we want you to use this intuitive method as you practice, and here's how you do it. In your practice over the next couple of weeks, whether it's a full-length exam or if you're doing question banks, what I'd like you to do is try the intuitive method. If you're just doing question banks in an untimed method, I want you to take a couple of extra steps. The first extra step is that I want you to take a timer, and what I want you to do is before you start reading the question, I want you to start your stopwatch. Then I want you to read the problem and the answer choices, make your choice. Once you've identified that choice and circled it, I want you to hit your stopwatch again. Write down the answer choice, A, B, C, D, and next to that on a piece of paper, I want you to write the time, 37 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute and 2, whatever it might be. I want you to go through all of the questions doing that so that you can then go back later and identify the ones you got right and wrong and how long you took. Now, why do I want you to do that? You're going to notice a very interesting phenomenon. You might have expected that the longer you took with a question, the more accurate you would be. What I think you're going to find is that the shorter the time frame, the more accurate you are with getting questions right. And the best way to prove it is just to do it yourself. You can, at the point that you finish question 1 and you've marked your answer choice and you've identified the stopwatch time, go to the answer explanations. Look at the choice you selected. Is it right or wrong? If it's right, mark it as correct and read the answer explanation. If it's wrong, mark it as wrong and read that answer explanation and the correct answer explanation. What we're doing here is helping to train the non-conscious brain to give it the feedback it needs that it's on track or it's not. Don't worry about how many you get correct. That's not the point. The point is that you train your mind to be able to find the correct answers. Then you go to question 2, you do exactly the same thing. If you're taking full-length timed exams, there's a couple of things that are different. One is you don't use the stopwatch, and number 2, you don't review the answer choices after each question. But you still do all the same things in terms of going to the intuitive approach. The reason that this is so important that you do it now is that if you build this as a habit, as the way you're answering multi-state questions, when you get to exam day, you're much more likely to do the same thing. What I don't want you doing is the intuitive approach in practice and getting great results, and then you show up at exam day and you freak out and you say, oh my God, I've got to actually sit here and analyze this stuff. This is the real thing. This is the day. And then all of a sudden, there's nothing here. It's all back here. You've been training back here. It's as though you were training to throw the football on every play and suddenly you decide to run, like certain football teams that shall remain nameless. So the point is that when you are doing that, you're suddenly getting out of your comfort zone. You're getting out of what you're good at doing. Practice the way you're going to perform on test day with the MBE. You will see enormously good results. And you may not get them on day 1, hour 1 in this practice, but it will get better and it will jump up very quickly. And for those of you in our group, you're already seeing people reporting pretty substantial results when they're doing this. All right, that's consistency and habit for the MBE. What about the next part of this, which would be essays? How do we get consistency in format there? I want to just briefly review the writing style because it's the same in all of the jurisdictions that we teach. It's essentially that you read the question, then go to your computer and you take the call of the question and you summarize that in headings on your computer. In other words, create an outline first. Look at the call of the question and create an outline. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you can't do that from the call of the question, take the major topics that you discern that are in the question and type those out as your headings. Underneath each of those calls of the question or major topic areas, ask yourself, are there multiple disputes to be resolved? If there are, identify those multiple disputes and call them A, B, C, and so on. So if you had a question that asked about causes of action, the first cause of action would be A, the second would be B, and so on. If there's only one dispute within a call of the question, you don't need that dispute level. Just skip it at this point. And then underneath each dispute or each call of the question, you're going to write 3 paragraphs, FLA, fact, law, application. And this is true no matter what exam you're in, whether you're doing a 30-minute question, a 45-minute question, or a 60-minute question. The idea is that you first want to create an outline of what you've got. So outline your entire answer from the beginning of the first call of the question to the last call of the question. You will have headings, disputes, and then FLA. In the FLA section, the first time through, all I want you to do is to summarize the basic dispute. In other words, what's the core of the second paragraph? Party A's argument and Party B's argument. Just put in a few words to give you that all the way through the answer. That's your second pass. So the first pass was just the headings. The second pass is what are the arguments in the L part of every one of those sections. Now the third pass, start creating a brief answer all the way through. So in other words, one sentence of facts, a couple of sentences in the law part, which is really just an expansion of what you've already started to craft with the arguments, and then a conclusion. Party A wins because, party wins because. And do that all the way through. You're going to have some time left over. With that remaining time, go back in and fluff out the rest of the answer. In other words, put in more information where you need it, but some things don't need a lot more information, and so you can simply leave them pretty much as they are. Let me focus in on the second paragraph for just a moment. There is a very specific structure that I want you to use in your second paragraph. And again, this applies whether you're in the UBE, Florida, Georgia, California. It's exactly the same. Sentence 1 of the second paragraph is Party A's factual argument. One sentence, not more, not 2, not 3, just 1. Sentence number 2 of the second paragraph is to paraphrase the rule of law that supports Party A's argument. This is made-up law, memorized law, somewhere in between, but the idea is to give us a sense of the rule that supports the argument. Again, only one sentence. Sentence number 3 is Party B's argument. This is the other side of the argument. And again, it's the defense or it's the reply, and it's one sentence. And then sentence 4, if you need it, is the rule of law that would support Party B's argument. If the rule of law that Party B is using is exactly the same as what Party A was using, don't repeat yourself. You don't need to say it twice, and you can skip that sentence entirely. But if it's an affirmative defense or if it's some different rule, go ahead and include that rule in your fourth sentence. Then you drop down to the third paragraph, and the third paragraph has a simple formula. And again, this is review for most of you, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Paragraph 3 is who wins this dispute and why, plus any additional facts, arguments, and law that support the conclusion, plus any damages. Why do we add additional facts, arguments, and law to the third paragraph? Sometimes there's an argument and a counter-argument, and then a counter-argument. We don't want to confuse the reader in the second paragraph, so you put it in the third. I don't want to belabor the point. I just want to remind you that's where that other information goes. Finally, for the fact paragraph, the very first paragraph, let me just remind you that it's no more than 2 sentences. It should be focused only on that part of the problem, and it should be short and very succinct. So that's our essay writing formula. Read the problem, create your outline with the headings, make sure you put in all of the sections, then go through and get all of your primary disputes, then fill out the outline more completely, and finally go back to review and add on extra pieces of information as you need it. When you do that, you're going to find that your writing becomes automatic, it becomes habitual. And I think For many of you that I've worked with, that's precisely what you're doing. You're writing in this very structured, very repetitive, time after time, question after question, section after section. Why? It's habit. You don't have to think about it anymore. You can focus on the law and the substance, which is what we want you to be doing. So that's our essay 4. The next thing I want to talk about is this performance test. We don't have performance tests in every jurisdiction, but we do have them in Georgia, California, and the UBE. So Florida people, you can check out for just a minute. But for the performance test, I wanted to remind you that there's essentially a 5-step process here, and I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. Step 1 is to open the package and make sure that you understand what the task is. Go to the task memo, review that, and find the task. Step 2 is to identify the audience and the tone. The audience will be legal or non-legal. The tone will be objective or persuasive. Identify which quadrant you're in and write that down. Step 3 is to go to the library. The library is made up of 2 parts. There's typically rules, and then there's typically cases, usually 1 or 2 cases, or 3 sometimes. What you want to do is to skim the library. You want to identify the rules, and then you want to go into the cases to get the further explanation of the rules, the interpretation of the rules. And what you're looking for here are things like there's a 2-part test, or there's 3 elements, or 4 things that have to be proven. You're looking for those kinds of lists in the case law. That's the most important piece of information. This is a skim of the cases and the library, not a detailed read. Once you finish that skim, since you know what the task is, go to your computer, take the primary items, the rules, and or the interpretation of the rules, and set them up on your computer. So here's rule number 1, rule number 2, or test 1, test 2, and so on, and just get them on your computer. The 4th step is to go to the file, the first part, and skim the file. You're not reading for detail. You're not trying to annotate it. You just want to skim it to see what the storyline is. When you've done all of that total process from the time you open the book until you finish the skim of the file, should take no more than 20 minutes. So you got to work really quickly. This is going to give you 70 minutes to prepare your performance test in terms of drafting. And what you want to do now is go to the first topic that you plan to write about on the computer. You want to go to the library in more detail and the file in more detail, and just draft that portion of the answer. Then go to the next portion of the answer and just read the file for that part and the library for that part. In other words, you never read for detail all the way through the library or all the way through the file. You're simply spot checking each of these. One other point, if you're a photo reader, go ahead and photo read the performance test before you begin. The reason for that is it'll make it easier for you to go back and find the information that you need. And that photo read should be really fast, just a couple of minutes, maybe not even that long. You're just getting yourself in a relaxed, steady state, and then flip through the performance test. Then begin with, here's the task, here's the audience and tone. I'm now skimming the library, and then I'm skimming the file, and then I'm beginning to draft. So that's what we're looking for in the performance test. And again, doing it consistently and under time conditions as you practice will make it much, much easier when you get to the actual bar exam. Having talked about the MBE and the essays and the performance tests, what I want to talk about is what do you do to get yourself personally ready to have the consistency and the stability and the habit that you need. Beginning with the time that you're watching or listening to this lecture, I want you to change your sleep schedule. What I want you to do is to set your alarm for the hour at which you will be waking up on Tuesday, Wednesday of the bar exam. So whatever that hour is, 6, 6:30, 5 a.m., whatever it might be, and whatever time zone it's going to be, set that time on your alarm. I want you to start getting up every morning at that particular hour. Some of you are going to say, I'm a night owl, and it's really hard for me to do that. That's the point. I want you to start changing your sleep and your waking habits. In order to do that, to get up at that hour, some of you are going to have to go to bed earlier, and that's okay. Start setting your bedtime at whatever time you need to go to bed. I would also suggest that any studying you do be done in the time frame of the exam. That is, there should be a 3-hour study session that begins between 8 and 9 a.m. in your local time zone and goes 3 hours. Then you should take an hour to an hour and a half break at lunch. And if you're studying again, it should be an afternoon study session starting around 1:30 going till about 4:30. Then you should take about a 2-hour break for dinner. And if you're going to do any studying at all at night, it should be for no more than 3 hours, but it should be at the night period of time. Then go to bed. That's it. And then get up the next morning and do it again. If you were doing this the rest of your life, it would be pretty bleak, but you're not. You're doing it just for a few days. And the whole goal here is to build in a certain rhythm to the work. It's getting used to working in 3 hours. It's getting used to getting up at a certain hour and being up and ready to go. It's getting to bed at a particular hour. Makes a big difference. Why can't you wait until the weekend before the exam? Not enough time to change the rhythm of your sleep and your wake time. Sometimes people ask, what do I do about exercise? If you're going to be exercising, the best time is in the morning before your first study session. And that may require that when you get up early in the morning now, you're going to do your exercise. If that's not possible, maybe you've got to change your wake-up hour to give you enough time to get your exercise in. But that's where I would put it, if at all possible. If you're a nighttime exerciser, if that's what you're going to do on exam day, then figure out how to build that into your schedule at that point as well. In terms of what you're eating and how you're eating, this is when you want to set those patterns in place as well. I would start preparing the kind of breakfast that you plan to have on exam days. I would eat the kind of lunch that you plan to have on exam days, and I would have the kinds of dinners that you expect to have on exam days. I know that's not very exciting, but I think this is the time to start choosing those foods, getting yourself used to that. If you're used to having a beer or a glass of wine every night at dinner, you're probably not going to do that on exam day, so you probably ought to stop that. If you are a coffee drinker like I am, figure out when you're going to have your coffee and have that, but stay with the schedule. In other words, don't change it up. Don't add or subtract to it. This is also not the time to quit smoking, quit drinking coffee, major life decisions. Don't do those things. I know some of you are going to get into just massive fights with loved ones. That's unfortunate. I hope it doesn't happen to you, but I know it often happens. Try to avoid it. But the other part of this is don't make big life decisions for the next couple of weeks. In other words, don't buy cars, don't buy houses, don't propose, don't break off your engagements. Just don't do those things. For the next couple of weeks, just focus on studying for the bar. Try to keep the big, massive decisions of your life to a minimum. There'll be plenty of time after the exam to handle all of that, but you want to be in a routine and a pattern now. So really, when you take all of this and put it together, what we're saying is you create this daily routine now for study and work. And as you do MBEs, you're doing them like you do on the test. As you're doing essays, you do those like the test. When you're doing performance tests, same thing. You're just building this habit so that when you show up on test day, it feels, looks, and sounds like just another day of study. There's plenty of time to do that if you incorporate those suggestions starting now. And if you've been doing them previous to this point, you're just that further along. But if you haven't done any of that, today is plenty of time for you to begin that and to build it as a habit before the exam, so that on test day, it just seems like another day at the office, albeit a pretty important one. Thanks so much for being with me. Bye-bye.